Hello and welcome to the Sky Blue Times YouTube channel. Today I wanted to look at Ederson and James Trafford in a little bit more detail. As with the reports that came out earlier today, Ederson is set to stay. Stefan Ortega is the goalkeeper set to depart, expected to depart this summer, and then James Trafford is to come in and likely to be the number 2, and Ederson continue as the number 1 until 2026, where Ederson can leave on a free. James Trafford could then take over as the future number 1 of Manchester City. And straight into that, I think when you're pairing the two of them, in previous videos I've spoken about the option of Trafford coming straight in as the number 1, Ortega being the backup, and that's definitely not as comfortable as what it seems to be proposed of Ederson and Trafford as a pairing, because you just have two number 1s really, like one a bit more long term and has his different flaws that we'll touch on in this video to work out. But in the case of Ortega, somebody that I don't feel is a number 1 for Manchester City. Trafford, that's somebody that could be a number 1, may have issues in the short term, may do very well straight away. So you have some of that risk there, even with all the upside that this is a guy meant to be England's next number 1. All the talent that he does bring, how well-rounded he is in so many different areas as a goalkeeper, being homegrown, somebody that could be at the club for 10 years as a goalkeeper. That solves a lot of problems, that gives you a lot of value. But then the kind of short-term risk of bringing somebody in that perhaps does have some gaps in his game, improvements to make, is taking quite a step up in level, going from a player that's played a lot in the League One, a lot in the Championship, season in the Premier League, to then now suddenly being the number 1 for the team that's trying to win the Premier League title, that's trying to win Champions Leagues. It's quite a jump. So to keep Ederson, to be your number 1, Trafford to come in initially as the number 2 that's going to take over by 2026, I think that gives you all the upside of Trafford and removes all of the risks, knowing that you can just continue to run with Ederson, that despite his criticism from last season, as we'll get onto with some of the stats, when it comes to shot stopping, he performed fairly well in that regard amongst a team that wasn't very organised in front of him, and more so that the issues lie with a keeper that you may think is not focused in their performances. But when we get to the season, that should be resolved, given that he knows he's staying and then departing in 2026. And then you've got somebody in James Trafford, young, hungry, talented enough that should Ederson have any issues, whether it's injury, whether it's form, you've got a player capable of stepping in for a few games or for a lot of games right there in James Trafford. Less so in somebody at Ortega, where you think he does a great job in rotation, and there was a period where he performed very, very well over the last couple of seasons, not last season, season 2 seasons before. But not somebody that you're looking at and going, that's my next number 1. Or can absolutely handle being an entire season as a number 1 at Manchester City without having some sort of impact on the team in some sort of way. When it comes to shot stopping, I think there's been a lot of really good content. I know Alex Barker's done a thread about James Trafford, talking about his real low stance that makes him slow to push off and get over to James Trafford's left-hand side and getting down, which would be the shooter coming down looking to shoot on the right side. That's James Trafford's left hand, getting across because of that wide stance, having to move his foot over, to the time it takes to move that right over to then push across, makes him slow to get down. And then obviously you just got that hand you're trying to get down to that bottom corner. That's something that he's mentioned there to be a concern. And when, at the start of the video, I'm talking about bedding a keeper in, Ederson continue as your number 1. That's exactly the kind of setup which allows somebody like James Trafford to come in with these weaknesses, work with the goalkeeper coach, work with the other keepers there, work with Ederson, learn from him, and get those things sorted before he's then becoming the number 1 that's playing all the kind of games that you would play. You're talking somebody that's played 45 starts last season in the Championship, and you're talking similar numbers, if not more, for Manchester City in a full season as the number 1 keeper. Those flaws will be exposed if you do not deal with them. Teams are very good, the quality of position very high. You think about the highest level in the Champions League, they will pay attention to all the little details, the players, the goalkeepers, to be able to exploit those small margins. So if you've got things that you need to work on, as Alex has mentioned in that thread that I recommend you check out, then this is the kind of arrangement for the next season that would allow him to work on those different things. But then when it comes to shot stopping, important to mention that Burnley's defence was fantastic last season in the Championship. That played a big part. So when you're looking at his stats from Bolton, facing 160 shots, conceding 34 goals in total in League One, from an expected goals on target of 40.07. So he's overperforming in that regard by not conceding as many goals as expected. High volume of shots, 160. We then move to Burnley in the Premier League, 23-24, concede 62 goals, 168 shots, and a 54.53 expected goals on target. So that tells you he's underperformed quite significantly in that first season in the Premier League with Burnley. And even when you look at Bolton, 160 shots and then 168 in the Premier League, League One, up to a keeper that's playing in the Premier League. That tells you about the quality improvement of the players, of the shots that he's facing, and he did significantly underperform in that season. Obviously, there's a lot of other factors with the way that Burnley was set up that season. Just how well the defence was organised. And then when you move to Burnley in the Championship, that really shows up when you're looking at 16 goals conceded, but only 104 shots, so significant drop-off. Expected goals on target, 28.6, and that's 45 starts as well. So it's not like James Trafford in the Championship last season was starting 20 games across the season and performed really well, but it's not a huge sample size. This is somebody that was definitively the number one for Burnley as they got promoted to the Premier League. 45 starts, more than enough minutes, but then only conceded 16 goals. That tells you a hell of a lot about his abilities as a shot stopper, as well as how well Burnley did as a defensive unit that season. But when you're talking about 16 goals versus 28.6 expected, not only has Burnley done their job to reduce the quality of the chances and the volume of shots Trafford is facing, but then on top of that, he has performed as well. I think it is very much both aspects here, both sides of the argument, rather than it being only built on Burnley having a great defence or only built on James Trafford doing exceptionally well. And just to move over to Manchester City, when you're looking at Ederson last season, bearing in mind this was one of their, if not their worst season under Guardiola in the Premier League. He faced 79 shots, conceded 26 goals, and expected goals on target of 30.4. So Ederson still overperformed in that metric, conceding less goals than expected, just over 4 in that regard. 79 shots, so that's even less than Trafford had to deal with Burnley last season. Per 90, that would be higher because Burnley's playing so many more games in the Championship compared to what Ederson would have done in the Premier League, conceding those 79 shots. But it still speaks to the quality of those shots that he's going to have to step up in. But then also bearing in mind that when you're coming to Manchester City, it's not him moving to Burnley in relegation fight again. You're moving to a team that should really, even if they underperform like last season, be a much better defence than what he would be facing at the very bottom of the Premier League. So that's just something to bear in mind. We're moving on to outside the box shots. So remember when I was looking at him from the Premier League, this was one of the things that people did mention as something that he didn't do particularly well in that season. 12 goals conceded from outside the box from 40 shots, 10.21 expected goals on target. So again, underperformed in that metric. You look at the Championship last season with Burnley, 3 goals conceded outside the box from 5.06 expected goals on target. So he overperforms in that metric, but then also the job of Burnley to be able to reduce the quality of the chances, reduce the shots, so 32 shots there versus the 40 shots in the Premier League. So that tells me in particular the Premier League, just the quality of players that can shoot on the edge of the box compared to what you'd be used to in the Championship is going to be one of the differences there. On top of that, Trafford just not handling it as well. But he did perform well last season in that area where people are concerned about. Again, to bring up Manchester City with Ederson last season, 13 shots conceded outside the box, 2 goals conceded, expected goal on target of 2.07. So when you're moving to Manchester City, you're not coming in as a keeper expected to face lots of shots outside of the box. compared to some of the other teams that you would play lower down the table that would be boxed in their low block, and teams would work chances on the edge of the box. So even if that is a concern, the volume of shots outside the box he's going to face is going to be quite a fair bit reduced if he is playing in place of Ederson in the Premier League. Filling out physically, that's something that was a real evident problem from his time with Burnley in the Premier League. It's an area that teams did target, in particular James Trafford, not having filled out his frame, not being as tall as he is now, not being as confident handling those kind of physical situations. Big central defenders, the physicality, the athleticism of Premier League defenders and Premier League attackers compared to the Championship, that is a big step up, along with the growth that Trafford did need to make. So he conceded 10 goals from corners that season. Expected goals on target 6.29, so underperformed on that metric. As I explained, an area that they did target and he didn't do so well in. You then go across to last season in the Championship. 3 goals conceded from the corners, 4.81 expected goals on target. So Burnley's done their job reducing the quality of the chances, the number of corners, the number of crosses, all line up with this as well, that he is facing. And then also James Trafford has performed in that by not conceding as much as expected, especially when you compare that to just him really underperforming in the Premier League season. And laced throughout this video is just important to bear in mind. Obviously, this is the Championship versus the Premier League. There are differences in the quality of the players. So it's just talking through the numbers in a kind of way to compare and to kind of explore these different areas. But all that kind of gets bared in mind when we're talking through that Championship, Premier League, so on and so forth. But then also knowing what kind of situation he's moving to Manchester City in place of Eden, what he'd actually be facing and deal with, the workload, etc. And then if we're looking at 22-23 in League One, he conceded 9 goals from corners, 7.26 expected goals on target. So underperformed there. So when you're looking at across those last 3 seasons, there was an issue in League One, an issue for Burnley in the Premier League, but then he's improved in that area when it comes to last season in the Championship. But it's still something when it comes to next season, when he gets to play in the Premier League, being the starter for Manchester City at points during that season, as I expect will come. That is something, along with, as I mentioned earlier in the video, about getting down to his left-hand side for low shots. That's an area to be watching that he does need to improve on. And all goes back to the start of the video about having that pairing of Ederson and Trafford to be able to bed him in slowly and work on the areas that he is weak and make those improvements. He's very much a keeper that will try and claim crosses. Good catch, doesn't, if any time spill the ball. Very good connection on his punches. Tracks the ball well, scans it well. Is there looking to come out and have an impact on crosses. As I mentioned, across the last few seasons, him developing physically has been a hindrance for him dominating these situations, and then it's still going to be something as we look to the next couple of seasons for him to become more and more confident in these situations and handle it. I think Raya is one of the best examples elsewhere in the Premier League of a keeper that does exceptionally well in this area, and has made that big improvement to Arsenal, where any kind of crosses into the box, you feel like he's always going to be able to come out and claim and make the situation just look calm. So compared to Ederson, 24-25 last season, 9 shots faced from corners, 3 goals conceded, expected goal on target 4.53. So even in a season where City struggled, where people pointed out that defensively in corners, not particularly great, attacking from corners, not particularly great, still the workload that James Trafford's going to have, the quality of chances, the number of corners he's actually going to deal with over the course of a Premier League season when he becomes a starter, is a workload much smaller than he would have been used to dealing with at Burnley, as well as the improvements physically and so on. Moving on to penalties, saved one out of 1 penalties for Bolton in League One. In the under-21s Euro 2023 final, saves a penalty in the final as England go on to win that tournament. There's a clip going around of Cole Palmer kind of predicting that will happen. Conceded no goals in that tournament. So when you're talking about somebody playing for their country, I know it's being under 21s, but playing for your country in those kind of situations, the pressure that brings in a final, as well as throughout the tournament, to concede no goals, to make the penalty save in the final for England to win the tournament, speaks volumes of his kind of confidence and character to be able to step up in those moments. 23-24 Premier League with Burnley, 5 goals conceded from all 5 penalties. If you look at the penalties themselves, where the shots went, goes back to, as I mentioned at the start of the video, something that Alex pointed out in his thread that I recommend you check out. All of these penalties are to his left-hand side. 3 of them are the bottom left corner, which is him getting that lower hand down, as Alex mentioned in that thread. And obviously, when it comes to the Premier League, the quality of the penalty takers is much higher than you'd expect for the Championship, League One, the under-21s, etc. So that's just something to bear in mind. Obviously, is somebody that can make the saves from the penalty spot, but still within that is something to bear in mind. Getting across to his left-hand side, the issues that he faces there, whether it is from the kind of shot-stopping situations, from open play, shots inside the box, or from penalties, he has shown a tendency to be weak in that spot. The stats back that up, and is something to watch when it comes to next season and beyond. You then look at the Championship, saves 2 out of 2 penalties, important saves within a game as they go on to get promoted from the Championship and move into the Premier League. Burnley, that is. If you look at where both of those shots place, both of those shots are to his right-hand side, so not the left side that I'd mentioned throughout this video. It is an area, the bottom left-hand side for him is a problem. They're to his right-hand side, and they're the ones he makes those 2 saves for. Distribution, a very important area as well to come on to. Now, one thing to mention, the volume of a Manchester City keeper when it comes to passing out from the back. I feel like when you see people talking online about what a City keeper has to do in a build-up, there's almost too much focus on the long ball aspect to it and not the all-around play. So when we're talking about Ederson, he has that kind of mentality, that kind of composure that gives off the vibe that he just doesn't really care about the pressure. He doesn't care what's going on. Anything could be going on around him, and he's cool, calm and collected. And James Trafford brings that same kind of calm energy under pressure. Very confident player, as you've seen by the quotes about him, his desire to be the City number 1. He is somebody that under pressure, playing out from the back, can handle that. Is able to play short. He can play with his left foot and his right foot when you're talking about short passes. Longer passes, he predominantly uses his right foot. Opens up his body very well, like you would see a midfielder to receive the ball, open up and give you all those passing angles to move the ball on. So when it comes to anything short, does very well. When it comes to the kind of chip balls out to the fullback, chip balls into the midfielders, driving it along the ground into the midfielders that are dropping the pivots, Rodri, etc. He can do all of that. I'm fairly confident from everything that I've seen. He can do that. It's the long passes where he needs to make the improvements. Very much somebody that likes to loft these long balls, compared to Ederson, that is able to do those kind of lofted balls, but then also add a kind of real drive to some of his long passes, a real zip to them as he hits them out to Marmoush, out to Erling Haaland, and that's in particular is the area you'd want him on the distribution side to work on it and then make improvements. And back to the very start of the video, as I've mentioned throughout this, to pair him with Ederson, to work with a goalkeeping coach, to watch Ederson up front. As we've seen Guardiola mention with Nico Gonzalez, it's different. It's a different level to be able to, as a coach, talk through an issue, a problem, explain something you want the player to do, the goalkeeper to do, and to be able to show them exactly what you want through the player that's the very best at that attribute with that quality. So when you're talking about Nico Gonzalez, it's very easy to coach him on what he needs to do when you've got Rodri in training session that you can watch and get a feel for everything. The same thing applies for Ederson, moving to Manchester City and Trafford, moving to Manchester City, being alongside Ederson, being able to watch him up front, learn from him. You get that same aspect that we're talking about with Nico with Rodri. So the long passing, that's the particular area he needs to prove on. I would bear in mind with that when you're talking about Burnley, this is a team that played long a lot, but was launching a lot of their passes. So I believe the goal kicks, it's more like 70-80% launching. The goal kicks, City's more like 20-30%. If you look at the average distance of the passes that are long as well as the goal kicks, you'll notice that Burnley hit those passes a lot longer. So that's another thing. And then, as I mentioned at the start of this section on distribution, when people kind of get an idea of what the City keeper needs to do. So we talked through the short aspect, building up, playing through pressure, playing through the lines, playing through the press. We talked about the kind of medium distance passes, chip balls out, driven into the midfield, chipped out to the fullbacks, chipped into the midfielders, and centrally driving those balls into the likes of Erling Haaland. We talked about all those aspects, and I think James Trafford would do very well in them. And then we mentioned the kind of long pass aspect of it and where he needs to make the improvement. But the volume of a City keeper, when you actually look at the likes of Ederson versus James Trafford, Ederson's volume's a lot less, as he has done across his entire season. So when you're talking about a City keeper building out from the back, it's much more about being more like a scalpel and picking exactly where you need to go, making the exact right choice. So when you're talking about a long pass, it's not that Ederson is always hitting long pass after long pass after long pass. It's that when City have the opportunity, they bait the opposition out, they make the right moves in front, that you then have a keeper ready to hit that pass when that moment comes, rather than every time he gets a goal kick, every time he has the opportunity to hit it long, he's just smacking it long into a certain area. It's much more about the team being set up right with the right movement, exploiting and opening up that space, and then it's on Ederson to be able to pick that out. So when you're talking about Ederson building out from the back, he's looking in front of him and seeing all the options play out and then picking the right one, rather than in his mind he's thinking we need to be able to succeed long here. And when you're looking at all the different tools that Trafford needs to have to be able to be a keeper for Manchester City playing out from the back, he has a lot of those. But when it comes to the long passes, he does have some improvements to make, and that kind of combination of Ederson and Trafford, I think, will help him do that. A few other things I've put down on my list to mention in this video. He adjusts very well on his line, I find. Like, he's always making the adjustment to the shooter to be in a good position to change the angle, etc. But he is quite slow to move between compared to what I'd want him to be at. So that would be one thing on top of everything that we mentioned in this video, to just improve, to be quicker when you are backpedaling and moving across your line and making adjustments. When it comes to 1v1 situations, I've also seen, this was mentioned in Alex's thread, as I've mentioned throughout this video, talking about in 1v1 situations, gets very low, very good at dealing with cutback situations and using his foot to get across if coming into 1v1s and then having to deal with that kind of situation. But then being so low is great for him when you're making those saves low, but then you're leaving a lot of space to be able to be scored over the top of you. And when you're talking about playing against the very best teams, that's always going to be something that you face. They will find your weaknesses and exploit them. And it will come down to important games in the Champions League where that forward knows, right, if I get the chance, this is the area I'm going to hit, because they've drilled it, they've analysed the team, worked on it, etc. And they know your weaknesses. But then when you look at, for the most part, for his 1v1 situations, if you look at Ederson, he's very much 0 to 1. He is out, committed, sweeping, making an action, making a challenge. You look at Ortega, he kind of bursts out and gets set in a position and then makes that save, plants himself in a great position. From what I've seen of James Trafford, he's kind of a bit of a mix between the two, so he will burst off his line, but then he's always looking to make little adjustments as he's coming out, judging the flight of the ball. When it slips over, but then also when you're reading the attacker that's on the ball, driving through in on goal. He bursts out, always making those kind of adjustments. But then, as I mentioned a bit earlier, he can be a bit slow if he's misjudged that to then react and get in a better position. He can be slow to adjust and be in a better position to then make that save. So that's just something to bear in mind. So yeah, this is pretty much everything. General kind of thoughts, as I've mentioned. I'll just go through my notes just to kind of remind you. So I think shot stopping, real standout. Talked about down to his left hand side, his bottom left corner. that is something to keep an eye on next season, whether it's penalties, whether it's from shots inside the box. Something to bear in mind that he can be slow getting down to those low shots. That's popped up across several seasons. Outside the box shots, big improvement. Obviously a step up in quality when it comes to next season, so something to keep an eye on. But I think he's made that improvement and deals with those situations better, as well as not expecting to have that kind of workload, getting hammered from the D on the edge of the box all game long, like he would at some of the teams lower down in the table. Improved a lot physically. Has all the kind of mental skill sets, as I mentioned. How well he scans, reads the flight of the ball, is brave enough, connects well on his punches, deals very well when he does catch the ball and not to spill it. Has all that aspect, but it's proven that across a Premier League season with all the kind of physical players that you will face, the defenders, the Virgil van Dijks, the forwards, not Erling Haaland, but some of the other forwards that you'll see, Victor Gyökeres moving to Arsenal, Hugo Ekitike, all these kind of big centre forwards. How well does he deal with those situations? That's not proven. He's shown he's improved in the Championship, but he's not proven it at the Premier League, so something to keep an eye on. Penalties, I'm fairly confident that will be an improvement on Ederson, and I'm sure over the course of his career at Manchester City, we will see that come up trumps for us in different knockout games, and that'll be great to see him do that. Distribution, as I mentioned, when it comes to somebody playing out from the back under pressure, I'm confident in that. Confident in the kind of more medium range passes. Being somebody that can chip out those balls to the fullbacks, into the midfielders, drive those balls between the lines to the pivots, to the striker that's dropping. That aspect, I'm fairly confident, fairly comfortable in James Trafford taking over. But when it comes to long passes, as I mentioned, adding more variety to his game, those kind of long driven passes that you get from Ederson compared to just these lofted long balls from James Trafford, adding more to his game. That's something to keep an eye on and something to make an improvement on for James Trafford. And then when it comes to 1v1 situations, the kind of how quickly he is to readjust position, something that he's a little bit too slow, but very promising, but obviously slow to backpedal, slow to make adjustments if he reads it wrong in those situations. So yeah, that's pretty much everything. As I mentioned at the top of the video, that kind of combination of Ederson and Trafford helps Trafford to be able to work on all of those deficiencies, make improvements, bed himself in, and then take over in 2026. You've got the person right there to be able to learn from, and that's great for him. So yeah, and I didn't mention actually, because he's been in the academy, you're getting a guy come in that is actually already really quite confident within the environment, comfortable in that environment. Coming from the academy, would have trained with the first team before. So yeah, I think when you're talking about a keeper settling in quickly and then having the time to work on things, and not be thrown at the deep end and deal with the pressure correctly, I think Trafford's in the very best position to do that. If we were moving on Ederson and bringing in somebody like Costa, I'd mentioned before on videos and newsletters and so on that he'd come in as somebody that's captain a team and has so much experience playing for Portugal, as well as for Porto in the Champions League and so many seasons he's played there. So that would help him bed in alongside the likes of Ruben Diaz and Bernardo Silva. But away from Costa, some of the other keeper options that people were throwing around, whether it's Jean Garcia or Chevalier at France, and there's many others on top of that. If you're talking about bringing in some of those young keepers, it's not easy to be confident about them bedding in and handling that pressure and getting comfortable within the club, within the environment, moving to a different country, and so on. So Trafford has all those kind of things in his favour when it comes to making the move and being a Manchester City number one. And all the way back to the very start, this is a guy that can be England's number one, that could be Manchester City's number one for 10 years plus, and as well as being homegrown, ticks a lot of boxes for the club. Would be great for him to work out, and for a player that I've really enjoyed watching coming through the academy and the academy games I've seen. It's great for me personally to see him come back, and hopefully he will be a success. If there's anything you have questions on, concerns about with James Trafford, please let me know down below in the comments, and I'll jump in and reply and try and get to every last one of them. If there's anything you want me to cover in a future video, again, let me know down below. I'll have a look and I can work on future videos based off what you guys would like to see, guys and girls would like to see. Otherwise, please make sure you like the video, support the channel, subscribe so you don't miss out on the next video, and we'll be back with plenty more content this week.